Hello, everyone. Today, LunarCRUSH welcomes Julian Tan from Binance Smart Chain. Binance Chain has grown to be one of the world's largest smart contract platforms less than a year, or around a year after launch. Insane. So we're super stoked to have Julian on and kind of learn about BSC and what he's working on and the ecosystem in general. He's going to have some updates for us. He even said there might be an announcement coming. So we're super stoked on that. He just lit us up with that beforehand. So we always love whether there's an announcement or announcement. So we're stoked. Also, everyone, disclaimer, as always, we do not take payment for our live stream. We bring on smart people, fun people that have dedicated their careers and lives to the industry and are working to build a better future. Make sure you get in there if you have any questions for Julian. We'll try and do our best to get those answered for you, and then get that subscribe button going. And we should be good. John, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing really good today. I'm trying to get my computer to work, and so far it's been great.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm stoked to get Julian on here, and let's pop him up.
Hey guys.
Julian, my man.
Hey.
What's up, buddy?
Hey, it's good. It's good. Thanks for having me today, John. Joe.
Of course, man. Of course. So we always like to start with where are you in the world, and what's it like there today? Or this evening?
I'm currently located in Singapore right now. Just a bit of background. I am actually Singaporean. Pretty much before COVID, I would have to travel around the world, different kind of blockchain crypto events. But we're all tied down here right now due to the ongoing pandemic. And Singapore is pretty much taking a very, very strict stance in terms of traveling outside Singapore due to the amount of cases, as Singapore being one of the Southeast Asian hubs for all these kind of conferences, like crypto conferences as well, right? For Asia, Singapore FinTech Festival. I think Consensus was here as well for one of those years, right? So unfortunately, I can't be traveling to wherever you guys are, and I have to join through the stream instead.
Yeah, well, next time when it loosens up, you'll have to come to Southern California. We'll take you surfing. We'll get you a breakfast burrito, and then we'll do this thing on a boat somewhere in Newport Beach. How's that sound?
It definitely sounds good. I mean, I'm definitely gonna take you up on your offer. I haven't been to California. I think the last time I was there, I think it was like 15 years ago. It's really, really a beautiful place.
Yeah, well, no, it's amazing. Yeah, no, I believe you when you say that. So the offer's out there.
I'm taking Julian to Disneyland.
The last time I was they only had I was a kid then, right? And they only had like one Disneyland. I heard right now there's like several. I think there's 3 side by side or something like that. Definitely would love to revisit.
There's 2 of them, but there's even better. There's a new Star Wars land, and it's like super
and the
awesome.
Avengers one, right? Avengers one's there as well.
Yep.
John, you were just there, right, for your birthday, or was it Carla's birthday?
my wife's birthday. Yeah. It was awesome. It was really great.
Oh man, no, that's epic. So Julian, we always, I want to hear a little bit about your journey into the industry. How did you find crypto? Why are you passionate about it? Why are you working in the industry?
Yeah. How did I come into this industry? It's a funny story. I was a fresh grad, basically bumping around various jobs. So I worked a stint in the retail banking sector. And then I moved on to doing a bit of management consultancy. And then after that, I left because I felt, I really, really couldn't find something I was passionate about. And then back then, I think it was like early 2017, before the previous peak, right? And then my dad suddenly started getting into crypto. And being a filial son, I was really, really afraid that he got scammed, because sometimes you do kind of hear about these kind of stories, right? So I started looking more and more into crypto, and basically that's how I started, right? As I read on, having a stint in the retail banking sector, I kind of understood how the retail banking sector worked, right? And looking deeper and deeper into crypto, I started realizing that, hey, this could be a really big thing, and this could definitely change the world. And we see it every day right now, putting regulatory pressure aside, we see it every day in terms of how the entire crypto industry is making a difference, especially in emerging markets, even El Salvador, right? And Bitcoin as a legal tender. Like, who would have thought about that? If you asked me in 2017, definitely not, right? So I was looking into crypto, and then, you know, I think back then I really worked like 1 or 2 years in the normal banking sector and all that. And, you know, I had a really, really good opportunity with Liquid Coin, where, you know, I was so desperate for a job in crypto. I was about to take up an internship role with them just to get like a foot in the door, right? But things turned out for the better. I was offered like permanent employment, and then I was doing, you know, managed marketing, and then transition over to business development, and then, you know, after that, 3 years later, I found myself in Binance. I was previously driving the business development efforts for Binance Cloud, which is a white labeling kind of of Binance's technological infrastructure as well as liquidity. And then at the turn of the year, I moved to Binance Smart Chain, where I'm primarily working on business development as well as ecosystem growth over the entire BSC.
So you were at Liquid for a couple of years, or a year and a half or so, and then you kind of came over to 3 years. Wow. Yeah, it's always fun. I mean, you know, we're a couple of years in the industry now, and you kind of, you know, we're somewhere like the prerequisite now can actually be like, hey, do you have a little experience working in the industry? Where it's like a couple of years ago, it was like no one had experience. Like, what experience, right? Like, there's like a very small group, and if you had already been working somewhere in crypto, you kind of were like, well, there aren't that many places to go. So it's like having a couple of different, you know, slots of experience across Liquid and Binance now. It's like, that's like, you know, you're like a veteran in the industry, basically.
Well, I would say that it's better, right? It's definitely better, especially like if you look at 2017, if you're trying to hire tip-top talent, the only way to go is the traditional banking sector.
Right.
But now it's getting better, but there's still this gap because if you look at the traditional industry, for example, if you're in an auditing firm and you're looking to hire like an entry level kind of position, so you could hire basically someone out of school, right, who has that kind of foundational kind of education pertaining to the industry. But for crypto, as well as blockchain, there's nothing there yet, right? So there's still this gap, and every day when you look at LinkedIn, if you look at the kind of articles that Cointelegraph, CoinDesk is covering, there is really a clear brain drain in terms of the crypto talent that's within the space, right? I do honestly think that things are getting better, but for now, this is definitely the situation of the entire market.
You know what, just to highlight what something you just said, it's really interesting because, I mean, we track every social post across every social account that mentions any coin. And we look at some of, like, say, like the mainstream media. You could throw things like CNBC, CNN, NBC into that category, and we see that they're mentioning like only 5 or 6 coins a year. And then you see the crypto news, and they're mentioning 130 a year, and we see 10,000 plus coins in the market. And so it's interesting to hear you say that, where there's a brain drain, but there's also a hyper focus on very few coins, on very few blockchains.
I think it's really I think the situation that you describe is really pertaining towards the lack of education the mainstream media and all the kind of other stuff has, right? If you ask, I'm not too sure about the situation in America, but if you ask a lot of people on the streets here in Singapore, if they heard of maybe, you know, Binance Smart Chain, I mean, sure, Binance has been really famous in the last couple of months due to regulatory issues, or you know, the utilization of Binance Smart Chain. But if you're gonna talk to an average Singaporean on the streets about Solana, for example, right, they might not actually know what is Solana or even Polygon, right? But if you're gonna say Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, Litecoin, then everyone knows that, right? So I think it's that kind of direction that everyone here, including you guys, are trying to work towards, right? The adoption as well as the education from traditional industries in terms of what cryptocurrency is, how the blockchain technology works, and the innovation that's driving the entire industry.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And it's like, even like we were talking about it before we got on, Julian, a little bit with like COVID and, you know, like especially, you know, some of the, you know, fiscal activities that have gone on over the last year with regards to, you know, injecting trillions of dollars, you know, into different, you know, economies, whether it's the US or China or anyone. And I think for the first time, you've got people just kind of like how, Pokemon Go kind of trained the world on what like AR was. Like, oh, I can hold my phone out in front of my face and see this thing in the real world. That's pretty cool. You had people asking questions like, well, what does happen when $4 trillion comes into the economy, right? Because it was like everyone's sitting at home, they're staring at the television or whatever they're ingesting, and you couldn't miss it. And I think it's like for the first time, there was this narrative in the mainstream about, inflation and what does that look like? And like, well, like maybe a finite amount of something is a good thing. And, what are hard assets? And like, so I think it's like we are kind of seeing the education switch a little bit. Like you talked about Solana. It's like I heard them talk about Solana for the first time on CNBC 2 weeks ago, obviously when it was like eclipsing $200 or whatever it is. So it's like these monumental skyrocket movements are crazy, but they get coverage, right? The same as like anything that happened with like Wall Street bets and like, like those guys are going to testify. They had, what's that guy's username? Pardon my language, deep fucking value. Like that guy was in front of Congress, like talking,
What?
so it's like that. Yeah. So it's like that is, in the mainstream and people are seeing that now and they're wondering like what's happening. So I think the narrative is getting out there, but yes, it's going to still take some time.
You know what though, Joe, like take when CNBC mentioned Solana. Yeah. I 1,000,000% guarantee you they weren't talking about applications built on it, the utility of it,
right?
DeFi, using your tokens. They're talking about, do I buy or do I sell? It's all price. Look, the chart, it's vertical. Let me pop it on the screen. They're not talking about ecosystem.
Yep.
And that's the problem. That's an issue.
I agree. Sorry to cut you there, Joe. I think
no, go for it.
Another thing that we're actually seeing throughout this entire COVID pandemic is the rise of new economies within the DeFi space or within the crypto world as well. I mean, GameFi, right? Who would have thought that it's ingenious, right? Who would have thought, like, if you tell me like 10 years ago when I was still studying, or like 20 years ago, that, I could essentially build my entire livelihood or even raise a family through playing games, right? Nobody could have thought that could be possible, but you see it every day happening right now. Like if you look at people in the Philippines, if you look at people in Vietnam, in Southeast Asian countries that were, largely really hit the hardest by this COVID pandemic, they're the ones that's really, really, embracing cryptocurrencies as well as this entire GameFi adoption, right? A lot of them are, from what I've read, they're starting to quit their jobs as well because being in crypto, playing games gives them much, much, much better, and that's what we're all working towards, right? Adoption of cryptocurrencies, adoption of the technology, and the opportunities that our industry is bringing to people who are possibly less fortunate, but overall, opening up more doors as well as endless possibilities in terms of redefining as well as reimagining how certain legacy issues or legacy systems could possibly work.
Yeah, no, and you hit on something there with like, when I think about that, I think about people that are kind of whatever you're putting value into and time into and effort, you're getting rewarded, but you're also getting rewarded for doing something that's maybe more fun or something that you love doing versus maybe being forced into. It's like, I know, and like there's, I'm sure a lot over there and here too. It's like, if you're not doing finance, you're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer, like people are pushing people to do these things, but it's like, we need more art, we need more expression, we need more creativity. And yeah, man, I mean, if I, I probably wouldn't even be sitting here right now with the amount of time I logged on EverQuest and Rainbow Six from ages like 10 to 17. I should be like retired by now if I was not, if this was, nowadays, but who knows how it all would have went out. But no, it's a great point. People are getting to do what they love and they're getting rewarded for it. And it's just a different business model that, kind of trickles down to the end user, which it should.
Agree. Yeah. Thinking back, I mean, sometimes I do get questions like, if I ever did regret stepping into an industry because it's so rapidly changing. Frankly speaking, sometimes a year here feels like 2 years somewhere else, right? But if you ask me, like, I get up every morning, feeling like I am doing my part of changing the world, and I'm sure all of you guys, Joe, John, you guys do the same. and that gives me that kind of satisfaction. Right, simply say it.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. John, you have a question highlighted. I want you to ask that one.
I have a whole bunch of questions that I was thinking. You know what, before we get into it, I want to go back here. So, because there's a question that's on my mind, and if I
Sure.
recall, I think it was the Moon Carl asked it on Twitter this morning, and he asked if $10 million Bitcoin were a possibility, and shying away from price targets. What do you think? And because this has been on my mind all day, what do you think the world looks like if Bitcoin were $10 million? I know we're detracting here, but I'm just curious because it's on my mind.
I generally try to stray away from any kind of price targets or price speculations. But what I can say is that if Bitcoin were to hit $10 million, right? I mean, frankly speaking, I don't know if that's gonna happen. I don't know if it will happen or how it would actually one day lead to such a scenario. But what I could say is that I think if Bitcoin is at that amount of price, I think we've certainly been doing something right. I think you will probably see the full embracing of DeFi, NFTs, and possibly what other kind of trend this entire industry might bring in the future, right? But I honestly see Bitcoin possibly being embraced as some form of international kind of monetary settlement, or it could be even the fact that instead of just using gold as the reserve, and you see that actually happening now with Tesla or MicroStrategy. A lot more companies are open to the idea of having Bitcoin as a currency reserve, right? So I would imagine that we all of us have done our parts as well as we reached where we wanted to be in the sense of global worldwide adoption of Bitcoin as well as the entire cryptocurrency blockchain kind of industry. I would assume that it would be very, very easy to just step into Starbucks, pay using Bitcoin, but nobody would have done it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing because if the price is so high, do you use it? But
Exactly.
to get the price to so high, you have to absolutely get to the point of using it. So and that you were saying like it becomes a global currency, and that means that there's a lot of activity on it that can't just be hoarded and held. So it's pretty interesting thought. I mean, you got to use it while you know it's going up.
I could be wrong, right? I could be wrong, but that's my personal thought because I think if we ever do reach that kind of price point, I think a lot of people would be able to use it, but none of them will, right? Only because it's really, really expensive to actually use the Bitcoin, and a lot of people would just rather use a different currency to pay for the expenses or something like that. But I see that they're coming in terms of worldwide adoption, the utilization, the payments, but I'm not too sure if the price would ever reach that price point.
Interesting.
I have a comment on that one actually. It's like I was talking with a friend yesterday, and they're it's actually Fabrica, John. They're doing like NFTs for land, and it like for me, I think it's two things. It's identity, like over collateralized loans for like, and then being able to like having houses settle, like loans for houses and loans for large ticket items, vehicles, like some of those large things. Like I think if those start to settle and you can kind of over collateralize like a loan. So it's like, hey, I only have to put down $50,000 to own a $500,000 home. I feel like that's where, I mean, there are trillions of dollars locked up in that arena that is completely untapped. And it's like, even if you had a small percentage of that and you started to work into it, it's just such a better way to do business that once that workflow is figured out and trusted, I feel like that's what like that world will look like. It'll just be a seamless like value transfer. Everything will have like an instant market value, based on whatever token that you want to use. But if Bitcoin is the bigger one that people are using for settlement and everything else, I feel like that's how it's done.
Yeah, I mean, actually, frankly speaking, sharing a bit of insights in terms of what I've been seeing on being developed on Binance Smart Chain, we do have some really, really solid projects, right? Addressing exactly what you're talking about in terms of over collateralization of loans, like or Ethereum. There's obviously Centrifuge, right? Who does that, but more towards SMEs as well as medium enterprises in terms of their loans, right? For BSC, we have Neos Finance that actually also does the same thing. Yesterday, one of the projects as well on BSC, they started doing real estate collateralization, right? Where people could, they would go out and actually buy the property using the funds that people stake using the LPs and all that kind of stuff. And directly, instead of people actually, just earning the kind of stable yield, the yield changes from time to time based on the rental yield from the property itself. Right, so I think we're definitely moving towards that direction. It definitely needs some kind of fine tuning there, but definitely I think Joe, whatever you just said, is going to happen really, really soon.
Yeah,
Love it.
no, I'm excited.
Beautiful. So let's talk about Binance Smart Chain. Let's go back. I mean, tell us what it is. Why was it created? What was it built to solve?
Sure. This is a story that I think people are pretty much sick of us saying that. So how Binance Smart Chain is actually created is the Binance Chain community, right? We have a community of developers, obviously, and they were pretty much burdened by all the limitations that existing smart contract platforms like Ethereum were basically giving them, right? High gas fees, low TPS, and all that kind of stuff. So they decided to band together and obviously, try to come up with something that solves all these issues that as retail users or retail developers, they were actually subjected to, right? So they came together, started to design Binance Smart Chain, which is 100% EVM compatible, just with lower fees as well as higher TPS, right? So that's really the story in terms of how Binance Smart Chain came about. And then, the rest is pretty much history, right? People automatically started building on it, as well as commercializing the entire blockchain. I guess, it's pretty easy. It was kind of a bit of a shocker because when we did that, right? Or when the community developers did that, their only thought was, we just wanted to contribute to the overall developer ecosystem and give people a solution, right? They never thought that Binance Smart Chain would reach that level of utilization that it reached today, right? So I guess if you're gonna you have a really strong problem statement and you give people a solution, then people are just gonna come in and start using, right? So that's how we go about really trying to explain Binance Smart Chain without going into all the final technical or technicalities.
I remember listening to CZ, I think it was back in January on Clubhouse when people still use that app. And it was like, he was talking about how not, I don't know if it's like almost like surprised a little bit, but like he seemed very excited about like, people want to talk about Binance and trading, and they wanted to talk about the exchange, and they wanted to talk about FUD, and he was just ignoring all of that. And he was just like, he kept coming back to like Smart Chain, and he was like, there's like something really cool happening here. And I just, there was just this kind of like proliferation of community and projects that started to get built. And I mean, it was like, what was the actual like date that like Smart Chain kind of came out and it was released? Was it was at the end of last year?
It was so the official date of which it got released was the first week of September. I think it was the 1st of September, if I remember right.
Okay.
But as for most chains, yeah, even though we did launch it, like for a developer to come in and build, it wasn't really like a straightforward process, right? It's like laying the foundation on which the entire castle is built on. I think a lot of the BD team as well as the tech team, we had to really get going, source out certain kind of DeFi Legos as well as DeFi composability components, and basically get them to come in or incubate these kind of projects to lay their kind of foundation in BSC, right?
Yeah.
So once we have all those DeFi Legos, those infrastructure kind of stuff, then people could then come in and start building. So I guess even though we did launch sometime in September, the process actually took us about 2 or 3 months to really get people going before the more mainstream people can just come in and build NFT marketplaces, GameFi projects, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that was just like I think that was, you guys had laid the foundation. Now that was like the momentum swing. It was just like, whoa, it's happening.
Exactly.
And that was, I mean, if you think about it, that's when like everything started to go a little bit. But like what you said right there with like the Legos, like I'm 100% convinced that, you know, even though it's still trading and everything else, that the DeFi Legos that you talked about are 100% key to a like robust and strong ecosystem. Like people need to be able to come in and have some sort of investing activity to do or understand, or wallets and like some interoperability. And then the fun stuff comes after that. It's like, you know, if you go straight to the NFTs and you go straight to some of this other stuff, it's like, those are kind of like marketing activities in a sense, you know, and fun stuff until NFTs have this other kind of business case that's out there. But it's like, I mean, like even looking at like Pancake and some of the like trading and different dexes, it's not just one, it's multiple. It's like, how did you guys get that developer community like really ramped up on being excited to come build there, you know, versus, you know, building on Ethereum at the time, which still had so many more users?
I think it's basically down to the point where we were giving people the solution to the problems that they had, right? A lot of projects, obviously, then I think when Ethereum was at 4,000, right? I think, and then there was a massive crash in terms of Bitcoin pricing. People were like struggling to actually get their assets off decentralized exchanges and all that. People were even willing to pay like what, $500 for gas fees. I mean, that's absurd, right?
Yeah.
So obviously with Binance Smart Chain, I mean, I'm not proud to say this because our gas fees did spike quite a bit since we launched Binance Smart Chain, but essentially it was a much cheaper alternative as compared to Ethereum, as well as, you know, we were able to obviously provide certain other things like a higher TPS, right? So that one was definitely a crucial part on why people started looking at BSC. And then, you know, for developer communities or businessmen, right? When they look at a bare kind of ecosystem, and then they compare it to Ethereum, right? Back then, I think Ethereum had like Uniswap, SushiSwap, and all the kind of dexes, but Binance Smart Chain had nothing, right? So it was really a kind of business opportunity for them to come in and make the entire chain and be the big fish on Binance Smart Chain. So it started off like this, and then we started seeing like Pancakes came out, and then we had Venus, and then we had more and more and more. We had Beefy, we had Autofarm, and more of these projects started coming in, right? So I guess everything started because we tried to solve a really huge problem that the DeFi community was having, right? And if you look at today's blockchain in terms of Polygon, if you look into the blockchain like Solana, they are also trying to solve problems within the blockchain space itself. And that's really how, you know, developers get going from that.
Yeah.
Through the solutions that they develop.
Cool. So I know you want, John, if you had something beforehand, but I know, Julian, you wanted to share a little bit, you know, on like some of your anniversary deck that you had. So if you want to go ahead and share that now.
Sure.
Yeah. Love to see.
Let me share my screen.
Yeah.
So everyone can see my screen, right?
You're up.
Cool. So this was what we've shared, obviously, during the anniversary of Binance Smart Chain, which was last month. So there might be certain discrepancy in terms of some of the data or some of the metrics here. But just to share, right, we've been talking about how far we've come. Since Binance Smart Chain was incepted, we have to date about a total of 90 million addresses on Binance Smart Chain. We've done a total of about, you know, 1 billion transactions so far. I think based on today, probably more.
Yeah.
We have, I think, you know, even though we have 21 staking validators at every single round, so far we have a total of about 50 to 60 delegators that have been trying to get that 21 validator slots every time a new block is being created, right? As well as this amount of BNB that's required to actually win those validator lots has been increasing exponentially as well. I think several months ago, I think during our 6-month anniversary or something, monthsary, whatever you call it. I think back then it was only about like 7.8 million BNB staked, right? And quickly within 6 months, that amount quickly swelled to about 15 million BNB. We also have currently 800 to 1,000 dApps that are currently on BSC. But we've accomplished all of that while actually maintaining an average gas fee of 40 to 50 cents, which is about 3% of what Ethereum charges at its peak, right? So we're incredibly proud of that, and it's not that difficult to see because of the gas fees. A lot of people have decided to come in.
Yeah, it's not even like a 5% improvement or 10%. It's like 97% improvement.
Exactly.
It's wild.
I have a question on that. I mean, because
Sure.
this morning I did a very simple transaction and it cost me $83 in gas fees, and it took 30 minutes to confirm. And I know we have
Was
so
that
many
on
projects.
Binance Smart Chain?
No, that was on Ethereum.
Ethereum.
And no, not Binance Smart Chain.
Because if that was so,
like, holy shit,
would have to call my tech
and it got me thinking. I'm like, it wasn't anything complex that I was doing. It was just that's what it cost at the time. And I've paid up to $180, I believe, one time buying an NFT off of OpenSea. And it just, it got me thinking. It's like, there's this whole tremendous ecosystem of projects being built and capitalizing on the fact that these gas fees just literally from a UX perspective don't work. Like the user sees something that's $180, they're not buying something that's $30 with $180 fees. It doesn't work. It works if you're Shaq, if you're Shaquille O'Neal and you're buying an NFT for $3 million, you don't care. But it got me thinking, like would BSC exist if ETH gas fees were 40 cents? Would Solana exist?
I would say that that's definitely something we are looking at, right? Because for us, we don't really see other chains like Solana and like Polygon as competition. Don't get me wrong. Like a lot of people like to paint that narrative like Ethereum killer or that kind of stuff. We don't agree with that, right? For us, it's mainly providing a platform, an alternative where people could easily access crypto as well as all the services that could come with crypto, right? So if you ask me, if Ethereum were to create a solution tomorrow with Ethereum 2.0 or 3.0 with 10 cents as gas fees, then I would say we would then access the entire ecosystem as a landscape and then see how else, the problems that you're having and how we're able to solve it. Because for us, it's really about presenting an alternative kind of solution that developers can kind of look towards, as well as for retail users, right? People always want choices in life. If you look at even with the mobile phones, there's always Apple versus Samsung versus Huawei, or that kind of stuff. And so likewise, we view the entire layer 1 blockchains or even layer 2 blockchains in the same light. So it's not a competition for us.
I love that. It's in the end, the consumer wins. In the end, it's this whole space grows because of that innovation. I love that. That's great.
John, do you remember listening? It was another early days listening to CZ. We were coming back from Los Angeles and our Techstars 4-hour drives through LA traffic. And he was talking about like that exact thing. Like, what do you do with people with FUD and competition? And, something that I learned from him was, if you're building in this space and you're dedicating your life to it, like you're a rising tide is going to lift all boats. And it's another user that's into the system, and that's positive for all of us, like net. And so it's like having that mentality, and it's like that's why obviously you can see what you guys have done with BSC and what Binance has done. It's that mentality, right? And like it's saying bring everyone in, open arms, anyone that wants to build into the space. And then to extrapolate on that, it's like even if someone's building something similar to what you're building, it's like if there was all things aside, it's like that person is thinking the exact way that you are. They'd probably be your best friend. And it's like trying to kind of hold that mentality, I think is important. So this is awesome, man. Yeah. So we're like cutting you off on the one screen because it's like the numbers are like insanely impressive. So you can keep going.
Yeah. So I'll just move on to the next slide, just in case our viewers are bored of staring at this. So for us, definitely we are trying to position ourselves as the foundational infrastructure for the emerging internet of value, or as some people call it, the Web3, right? If you look at how our ecosystem has developed. So we started obviously with decentralized finance or DeFi, right? And then when the NFT surge started coming up, and people were finding all these kind of crazy ideas for CryptoPunks and all that kind of stuff, BSC was there as well, right? We were ready for the entire wave of NFT adoption, and likewise, the same thing happens for GameFi as well as the gaming on the blockchain. That's so in terms of our ecosystem. If you look at the three main areas of DeFi, or that's how I would like to call it, the pillars of DeFi. These are really the main areas of which most people are actually getting into. And BSC, we have a pretty vibrant kind of projects or selection of projects in each of these categories, right? So we're pretty much proud of that. And what I can say is that the next time a new wave that comes out, it could be prediction markets or it could be binary options or something, BSC will be there as well.
Awesome.
So for, moving on to the ecosystem as well as the community, if you look at our ecosystem, like the previous slide I've mentioned, we've grown exponentially. Even the figures wise, the amount of people there, our social channels, our developer community, we have actually grown exponentially, but it's not enough, right? I think none of us over here in Binance Smart Chain would actually stop until we can get the entire world's population on board to crypto. It'd be on Binance Smart Chain, or it could be even on a different chain like Polygon or Solana, right? That's what we're actually working towards. So for our tech roadmap, right? Obviously, for us, as I previously repeatedly mentioned, we don't actually see different chains as a competition. But generally, in terms of how the industry is actually moving towards, we see interoperability as well as composition as a very, very, very crucial next step for the entire DeFi economy, right? And so that's what basically we will be working towards, enabling bi-directional interoperability between different chains. We're doing that in terms of several kind of initiatives. We have the Binance Bridge, the B tokens that allow several kind of tokens and people to on-ramp from different kind of blockchains, right? As well as our projects as well. We're not tying them down in terms of saying they're only allowed to be on BSC. We're not. In fact, at some point, we always do recommend that they look towards building or integrating with other chains as well, because at the end of the day, we're always thinking about our users, right? And users want a choice, and either they could choose to on-ramp directly from Binance.com or Coinbase to Binance Smart Chain, or they could even onboard to Polygon first and then decide to move their funds to BSC. That's fine with us, right? So we're definitely think that in the future, every single protocol on DeFi would be cross-chain interoperable between every other chain, right? Another thing we're definitely focusing on is to come up with something where we're able to push for a higher performing kind of EVM as well as optimize our current infrastructure, right? We're looking in terms of resolving several storage bottlenecks as well as the concurrent execution of the EVM. Right? We're also looking towards light node support for archive APIs as well as right stream, as well as we're trying to achieve a much faster block finality, lesser than 15 seconds.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
In terms of
how many chains have a block finality under 15 seconds? The only one that I know Avalanche is there, but like there's got to be just a handful, I would assume. That's not block. That's not transaction time. That's finality. That's different. So that's fast.
I would say that I can't speak for Ethereum because they're entirely decentralized like us, right? We lay the infrastructure, our developer community lays the infrastructure, and then the validator approves, right? So, but we're lucky where our developer community shares the same vision as the BSC core team.
Wow.
Right. But what I would say, 15 seconds would be considered slow in years to come, right? Especially as technology actually develops. If you look at the gaming fi industry, and they're pushing us for much, much, much faster block finality. Right. We're talking about in the future, one day, hopefully, having that kind of League of Legends kind of gameplay exactly on the blockchain, right? And with that, 15-second block finality that's way too slow, right? So I would assume every single chain would be looking to actually improve on the block finality.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So moving on, For network enhancements, we also are looking in terms of on-chain randomizer support, as well as privacy preserving solutions on BSC, like zero knowledge rollup and that kind of stuff. We're looking into it, right? And we're also thinking as well as looking to develop an on-chain governance for the upcoming BSC DAO. Okay.
Very cool.
So just to go a bit more in depth in terms of the tech roadmap, this is what the entire BSC core team will be focusing on, right? High performance infrastructure, obviously, strengthening critical infrastructure, tooling, as well as services to support really large scale activities, right? As well as, bridging CFI and DeFi, right? I think, CZ, as well as a lot of knowledge or KOLs that has been, talking about DeFi have always at some point brought up, the bridge between CFI and DeFi. So likewise, we're looking to do the same, right? We're also looking in terms of large scale NFT tokenomics, especially like GameFi, social finance, in order to further drive mass adoption of opportunities, right? And so previously, like what I said at the start of the stream, we GameFi, it kind of brought in like a whole new bunch of people who are gamers who didn't even know crypto, right? And we're looking to do the same thing in terms of social finance, in terms of fan tokens and that kind of stuff. We definitely see the space potentially also heading towards that area. Of course, then advanced DeFi Legos, we definitely think there is a really lot room for growth for the entire DeFi space, where there's a lot of traditional financial kind of instruments as well as products that are not actually into DeFi yet. So the bigger question is then, what else is needed? What kind of other projects do we need to actually go out and find or incubate in order to allow these kind of projects or products that are not even in yet from traditional finance to now come into DeFi and provide like a brand new gateway into an exposure, right, into all these kind of more sophisticated products. Right? Mm-hmm. And obviously security, right? Security is absolutely our number one priority. If you look at all the kind of chains, right? I think 4 or 5 months ago, a lot of people were just saying, even like CoinDesk in DC, BSC is just the wild west of DeFi, right? The projects that aren't safe. But the way we see it is that as long as any of these projects, right? Any of these projects are starting to grow in terms of TVL, in terms of traffic, transactions, they would always naturally be a target for people of ill will, right? Hackers, right? So for us, security is definitely the number one kind of concern. Nobody likes to have, invest in something where they are at an extreme high risk of losing their funds. So that's something we're actually looking at. As well as we have this MVP program that's going on right now. We actually done it for since the start of the year, and right now we're in season 3, right? And we're looking to actually help these projects who actually come into MVP perform well during a specific time frame, and then really looking to accelerate their growth either through an investment or through several partnerships that we might be able to recommend with Binance.com. Right. So we're definitely, this would be our focus for the rest of the year, as well as going towards 2022.
That's a great point, yep. Julian, with because it's like, there's two things that tend to happen that kind of get the bad connotation. It's like, if something grows too quickly, you're right. To put all the infrastructure and security together that fast. I mean, sometimes these TVLs are going to billions of dollars in a matter of a couple of months. Right. And so they're probably not scaling as well for privacy and security. And then the other subset of that, which is part of what we kind of try to solve with people understanding community, is those lower level projects that maybe have a little bit of traction, yet, the kind of founding team hasn't doxed themselves, or, just rug pull stuff that happens. And it's that's the stuff that it's we're trying to help with, hey, this is literally a week old. There's no community here. This spike went up. It's maybe you want to give it a little bit of time, and it's always after you see those big spikes, crazy engagement that you hear about a rug pull, right? So there are tools for people to protect themselves against some of these things. And it's I'm glad to hear you guys are doing that. One piece in there I wanted to ask, sure. Which I think is a huge infrastructure, piece to our industry, is storage. And so a Filecoin or a Bluezell, or like in a cash network. It's like that to me is a missing piece, because we're talking about like 15-second serve time for like block finality for certain tools that we're going to be building. But, talking about storing, if we're going to have a decentralized Instagram, right, or a decentralized TikTok, and people are uploading 60 megabyte videos millions and millions of times a day, no one's going to wait 15 seconds for each or longer for each kind of like swipe up of their feed. Are you guys thinking about storage at all when it comes to, decentralized storage and speed, or are we still like years away from that?
So I wouldn't say we're actually years away. If you look at, like, funny you mentioned Filecoin, right? Because that's definitely one of the aspiring projects looking to solve this issue.
Yeah.
Our Reef is obviously another one, right, that looks to tackle the storage issue with blockchain and all that kind of stuff. And for us, for Binance Smart Chain, and I'm sure it's the same scenario for some of the other chains that have been repeatedly mentioned over the course of the stream, they are looking to partner up with this kind of projects as well to basically reach a faster finality speed, as well as solve the storage issues, right? So we're definitely looking into potential solutions that might solve this elephant in the room. But for now, I would say I can't really say, because it really depends in terms of how the technology moves, the trend and all that kind of stuff. I can't really say that we're really close to achieving 1 second finality, right? But it's definitely something that everyone in the space is working towards. And I would say if tomorrow there is some new token or project that is able to demonstrate that they have the ability to actually execute something like this, then we're definitely keen to partner with them.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, if they're from or incubating on Solana or Polygon. For us, we're all about self-improvement and building like a better ecosystem for all users.
Julian, on your last slide, I have a question. You mentioned GameFi, which a lot of us probably thought that was the first place that crypto would grow, because gamers and in-game credits and all of that. I mean, it's like a native experience almost. So it's super exciting to see it happening now. DeFi, built by crypto natives, used by crypto natives. Social tokens, super exciting. Going to be an exciting next few years on that one, I bet. But CeFi moving into DeFi, it's interesting because you have this amazing, technically advanced and innovative platform that just keeps growing. How do you deal with bankers in centralized finance that are exploring DeFi? It seems to me like you end up with a point where you have this incredible platform, this incredible chain, this incredible functionality, and people that just don't get it. So how do we bridge people into DeFi?
Right. So for me, I'm not too sure if you guys had that kind of opportunity, but several hedge funds or several traditional finance guys have been actually reaching out to me, wanting to speak to me about how I view the DeFi space expanding and that kind of stuff. And most of the time, I kind of advise them for free, right? Because we're all really working in terms of education. But there is a clear interest. There is a clear interest, right? This is what I'm seeing on the ground. There is a clear interest from the traditional guys, the ones who are sitting up there, that they are actually interested in exploring DeFi. Because if they don't, right, they're definitely going to lose their market share, right? If you look at your savings account, I'm not too sure how is it in the States, but in Singapore, they're giving like shit returns, right?
Terrible.
It's like 0.05%.
Zero. Yeah.
And if you look at stablecoin U farms, stablecoin farming like Ellipsis, Curve, right? You're talking at least minimum 6%. That's what Coinbase was looking to push out before the SEC shut them down. If you look at Binance side, we're leveraging off DeFi solutions like Binance to actually give them enhanced interest rates, right? So I could essentially see traditional finance also moving into the space, or at least minimally copying the models of some of the DeFi protocols, and boosting that kind of interest rate, right? Because look, inflation's coming. It's already here, and the inflation rate is getting a lot higher because of COVID, and the Feds are printing way more money than they should. People, especially youngsters, right? People our generation, the younger ones, they no longer trust the government, right? They don't trust the central banks anymore, right? Because these hedge fund guys, these traditional finance guys, they've always been taking like a huge cut that they actually earn from, for example, lending, right? Being the middleman, right? And DeFi actually tries to get rid of the problem, right? And basically give the lender or the borrower the bulk of the market share that actually goes to these traditional finance guys, right? So for them, they are definitely interested. Don't get me wrong, but I would personally think that it could be some time before these people actually really enter the space and fully embracing DeFi, because or several stuff, you know, you're not gonna actually explore DeFi or put a large amount of all your funds into DeFi if such kind of hacks are going on, right? We definitely need like an optimum standard in terms of what security or what smart contract programming should be like, right? To ensure like a certain amount or level of hack proof. They need that kind of surety as well as assurance that the funds that they're actually layering into DeFi protocols are safe, right? So till we actually reach that space, I don't think the traditional finance guys would come in fully. Just to answer your question, John.
So we're in this kind of investigatory what's
Exactly.
here space. We're not in we're building and launching phase for most of these CeFi products. They're trying to grab it, understand it, and they're probably trying to hire crypto people into banks. Which is
they're trying to have those informal calls with guys like us and be like, how crazy are they? Fully crazy or are they half crazy? They're trying to figure out like where you are on the spectrum, and then they're like going to start tapping a couple of people. But I think they should go head first in, because I've had some of those calls too, Julian. It's just like picking your brain, trying to figure it out, and they're like, there's some people that are really smart, they're humble, they're trying to get in, and then you've got kind of these people that fly into these convos and they're like, how are they paying, and these aren't like some of the top people, but these are the kind of the people in the middle of like, how is 14% APY like possible? It's like a junk bond pays 12%. That's the most I've ever seen. I'm like, are you really comparing the junk bond of like a manufacturing company out of New Jersey to the largest proliferation of wealth that's ever happened in history? Like, people are getting, these hedge funds are getting 20, 30, 40% all the time. You're just not seeing that. And so when you remove like, a 250,000 person head count and it's an algorithmically driven stablecoin, there's a lot of overhead there that they can pass along. And so it's just a matter of time, I think, before people have that light bulb go off, and it's, that big money is going to start piling in.
I would bet.
If you look at,
I was just going to add one little comment on that. I would bet that when banks start to offer some of these products and they're like, hey, here's 3%, Joe, that bank is making 15% and giving you 3%.
Yeah. Like there's so much money that they leave on the table every day. And it's almost like, it's just hilarious. It's almost like how, but they're, people are fearful of what they don't understand, and they don't understand what they don't take time to go and understand. And so it's just a matter of time. But I think it's tough though, because it's like this industry is so, like we've been talking about, open arms, everyone come in, where it's like it would be very difficult to go to the other side of that and say, hey, we're going to go try to offer our customers 3% now instead of 0. It's like, no, give them the full amount. You guys come over this way. So I feel like we're pretty stubborn.
No way. They won't.
I think it's several stuff, right? If you look at the traditional banking fund, so just to give an example, right? Our local bank here in Singapore, DBS, if you're gonna take a mortgage loan from them, right, they're probably gonna charge you maybe 1.5 or 1.7% of the entire mortgage amount, right? And that's I would say that is actually low because of COVID, right? The last I've heard, maybe it's about 1.6, 1.55.
Wow.
Right. So
that's wild.
Before pre-COVID, right? Pre-COVID, you're probably charging you like 2% or something like that. Right.
That's great.
And that's basically just for lending you the money that they don't actually own. They're lending you the money that it belongs to someone else, right? That they're actually only giving like 0.05% interest, which is shit, or 0.5 interest rates, right? That's one of the reasons is definitely because of the way they're being set up, right? The middlemen, the admin costs, and all that kind of stuff, right? The agency costs, or what some people might like to call it, But if you look at DeFi, right, and you're performing the exact same action where you're lending the money directly to someone who needs it, maybe for a mortgage or maybe to purchase a car, and you're getting maybe what, 18%, 20%, and that might even be low for some of the platforms, right? And that has a lot to do with cutting out the middleman, right? They don't have the smart contract doesn't really have to pay for having a physical branch, right? They don't have to pay for the admin girl who actually does the paperwork for the company. They don't have to pay for the cost of even printing paper, right? The smart contract, essentially, you're just paying like a really, really small fee for the developer who actually programs that, and obviously the validators who validate this transaction, right? So it's not that difficult to actually justify to these traditional guys, why the DeFi is able to offer so much higher.
It sounds like all these projects actually have as a community.
Yep.
That's sure.
I just hearing you say that, Julian, and it's just like, we talk about it a lot too, John. It's like, it's pure insanity what solving the double spend problem did. Like, it's literally that was it. Just one little thing. And I remember at the beginning when everyone was talking about, they're like, it's all about blockchain. It's not Bitcoin, which is like, there's a thread of that is true. But we did need Bitcoin to grow to where it did in order to kind of like proliferate the rest of the market. But now it's kind of coming back to that narrative that it's the solving of the double spend problem. Like, that is the technology like advancement of the next 100 years. And it's like, we're in the first 10 years of that. And it's super exciting.
Yeah, indeed. Like when I first started a career, a lot of my relatives were saying what I was doing was a scam. Why don't you get like a proper job and that kind of stuff? And then this run, they're getting into crypto.
Welcome to the club.
What's Bitcoin? What's Ethereum? Right? So definitely there is a problem with centralized finance. They definitely would have to re-innovate themselves at some point, right? Because we're pushing them every day. Some new ideas, new ways of doing business. We're doing that.
Yeah. John, you had a good question
so
here.
Before.
Yeah. No, go ahead. If you want to, do you want to do your announcement?
Yes, you're right. Before you guys say anything, not too sure how many people are tuning in, but for BSC, so in terms of a tech roadmap, apart from what I've covered already, we will be launching a layer 2 just for BSC, right? So it's not like the layer 2 solutions that how Polygon does that, right? It works in a similar way, but this would actually play into what we envision in terms of much, much, much faster block finality, right? So for certain of these multi-chain or side chains, some of them would have a block finality below 15 seconds, right? So the very first multi-chain that we're actually launching would be the GameFi chain. So this would be a brand new chain, a brand new side chain that caters specifically to GameFi projects, as well as has the characteristics that would be enticing to GameFi projects, right? We're talking about gas fees that are lesser than 1 cent, a quarter of 1 cent based on my testing results, right? So that's really, really crazy. And with the ability to perform up to about, I think, 10,000 DPS, right? So we're moving closer to having like League of Legends on the blockchain, right?
Wow.
But that's not all, right? So in the earlier part of my conversation, I mentioned, the major pillars of DeFi, right? GameFi, NFTs, even DeFi, right? So the GameFi chain is obviously the first one. We are also looking into separate multi-chains just for DeFi as well as NFTs and whatever other kind of industries that might be coming up. And all of these multi-chains and all of these chains would have very distinct characteristics in terms of how they would cater to the developers that are building specific kind of protocols, right? And how it works is that it's similar to how Polygon does that, right? In terms of the processing majority of the transactions in the one bulk transaction and then signing it on the legacy chain. So these chains would essentially be similar in the sense that BSC would be the anchor chain, and these multi-chains, kind of relays and processes all these bulk transactions, and then at one go, just do it on BSC, keeping the gas fees really, really low, right? So we're incredibly, incredibly proud of this. And the best thing is that the gaming chain testnet goes live in about 3 weeks.
In 3 weeks. And do you have a name for it, or is there going to be a separate name?
Well, internally right now, we're just calling it gamify sidechain.
Very,
So
very
we
cool.
might have a separate kind of thing, but you know, essentially it would still be like the BSC. Everything would be still like BSC. So think about having like multiple nodes and one master node, right? These multiple nodes would then be miniature versions of BSC, and everything just goes through the main BSC, if that makes
Very
sense.
cool. And so, like you said, this is going to start with GameFi, enable like finality and block time increase for gaming specifically to start.
Exactly.
And do you have anyone lined up yet to start any partnerships yet that you could talk about with people that are going to start building on it?
So for the GameFi chain, it's going to function exactly like how BSC does, right? Everyone's free to come in and build that. We are in the process of getting several of our more popular GameFi games on BSC to actually test the testnet, right? And get them building that to really show. Because if you look at a lot of the games nowadays, like for example, PvP, right? The game mode PvP, a lot of them have that kind of issues. Really long times, long intersection before you're able to battle with the next person, or even some kind of glitches, right? If you look at several like world boss on WoW or something like that, sometimes people end up pushing through several failed transactions because the boss might be dead, but on your end, you know, it still looks like the monster is actually alive. Right? So with these GameFi chain, we're actually hoping to resolve those kind of issues as well as keeping the gas fees extremely low.
What is, I guess, like, what's the target here? Is there a certain level of transactions that you look for to use this? Is it a user experience issue where it's needing rapid speed? Is it like what exactly is that benchmark that would use this?
For us, we're trying to take GameFi or an adoption of cryptocurrency and blockchain to the next level, right? So naturally, if you look at the current GameFi landscape, you are severely limited by that TPS as well as finality. It's impossible. Right. If you tell Steam or Valve to run Dota 2 on the blockchain right now, you know, they wouldn't even be able to complete a single game, right? So we're trying to work towards that. In terms of transactions wise, anyone's free to use it. Right. So as long as you're a developer, you have smart contract coding experience, feel free to come on to the GameFi chain once it's publicly launched and do your project there. Right. For us, we realized, and why we thought about this apart from the TPS as well as the latency of GameFi games is the gas fees. Right. If you look at Axie Infinity, the reason why they're having their sidechain, because if they were to sign every single transaction on Ethereum, man, like they'll be paying like millions of gas fees per day.
Yeah,
right?
not impossible.
So we're obviously also thinking about the developer themselves. Yeah. And that's how we came up with this entire chain.
Axie has set such a precedent. It's unbelievable. I mean, like a lot of people don't know, but they're the second biggest NFT marketplace behind OpenSea. That's just insane when you think about that. And so that just tells you the GameFi opportunity right there. And there's others out there, but do have a question. And I know we've taken so much of your time, so thank you. But you know, back in July, we were reading an article Be In Crypto published. They were interviewing you, and it said, to quote you, you said, "We believe that there will be many more versions of BSC to come." Tell us more about that. Is that part of what we're talking about here with the layer 2s, or tell us more about what you were talking about there?
Well, with many more versions of BSC, it could be interpreted in many ways, right? We obviously at some point might even consider doing like a BSC 2.0, legacy BSC 2.0. So I'm not talking about all these kind of sidechains, right? I can't share too much in terms of what the developer community has planned, but this multi-chain could possibly also work towards that. But frankly speaking, when I said that back then in June, I did understand that, you know, we were kind of discussing on several of the issues and how to tackle some of the issues that we see in several pillars of DeFi, like for example, GameFi, right? But back then we didn't really have like a solid final solution and say, you know, we're going to push through this, right? Back then it was more of a matter of discussion and reviewing in terms of a lot of our own technology and, you know, speaking to projects and see how we could have done it better. Right. So obviously then, you know, we had that thought and, you know, the process kind of led us to what I've just shared, which is the multi-chain. Right. I would assume that maybe at some point, if we do see Ethereum 2.0 being a big hit, and, you know, obviously there are solving some problems and we feel that, you know, there might be several other rooms where we can solve it in a different way, then maybe we would introduce BSC 2.0. Not too sure.
Amazing.
Wow.
Well, Julian,
Wow.
man, I appreciate you staying up with us. I know it's about 2:15 in the morning for you. But thank you, man. This was awesome. It was great to, see the stats and the data and see how well everything's been going, and congrats on all the success and all the fun you're having, and the joy that you bring to the space, man. This is great. I really appreciate it. Thank you everyone out there for listening. John, as always, it was a pleasure. Julian, we'll chat with you backstage. We've been tweeting about this whole time. People are out there. They're stoked. So we'll chat with you in just a second. And thank you again, everyone, so much.
Thanks, guys.